a healthy relationship looks like this, or your partner should do this. And then we're like, well, mine doesn't. And I didn't realize I needed to want that. And then all of a sudden we're just in our heads where we're going crazy with all this comparison. So that's why it's like, I'm a huge proponent of social media. I'm a huge proponent of people sharing their stories and what's worked for them. But we have to be willing to say, that's a no for me, man. It's a no for me. I don't even need to dip my toe in that water. Like, my past experience has said that I don't need this, and that's finite.
Thanks to Sana Skin Studio for supporting the No podcast. Sana is a skin studio that is shifting the relationship with your skin and your products through goal-driven facials, real guidance, and clean skincare. Stay tuned for our promo code so you can receive $25 off of your first facial at Sana Skin Studio. Welcome to the No podcast with me, Nikki Spo.
Welcome back, my friends. You are listening to The No, where it is not about knowing everything, but about coming to know ourselves. I am your hostess, Nikki Spo, and I am so happy that you're here on this journey with me. Today, we've got Case Kenny, you guys. You likely follow him, or at the very least, you are definitely familiar with his motivational meme-style posts on IG with the white background and the red handwriting, dropping hope bombs and truth bombs and beautiful messages for self-actualization and confidence building, encouraging millions of people to be true to themselves and believe in their worth. Case's words have definitely helped me believe in myself more, especially since the very first time I interviewed him, that's episode 40, I was heavily going through it unbeknownst to anyone. Okay, so before we get started with Case, here's a quick reminder to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening in from so that you never miss an episode and you get automatic downloads, which help get our discussions in front of more people who need to hear them. Also, you've probably heard me talking about the exclusive online women's community that I have created called Becoming Her, where I have been meeting with women from all over the country as we hold space for and encourage one another to become the her of our highest desires, myself included. The power of community and shared experience has given me tremendous strength and hope, and it has truly transformed my entire life. So I want to invite you to come sit with us, and I have a special gift, a discounted lifetime membership specifically for my audience, which is linked in the show notes, and I will hope to see you in there. Okay, so back to Case. You post his content, and I'm interviewing him today for the second time, coming from a whole new mindset and state of being. That's it. Let's get started with Case Kenny. A lot has changed since we last spoke. Like, first of all, you moved. Bienvenidos a Miami, my hometown. I'm a native. I'm not a local. I am a native.
There it is.
Welcome. I'm so excited that you're here in this great city.
Thank you. Gracias. Good to be here. Yeah, trying to evolve the Midwest Case into Miami has been great. But yeah, we love it here. I mean, so creative and warm. It's like very conducive to what I do.
I love that. So I was actually just in Chicago not too long ago I was there for my cousin's graduation from the Art Institute. Cool. And had a ton of fun there with my family. And then I actually got to go back and hang out with some friends and do like a whole like foodie scene, which has been a lot of fun. But those were the only 2 times I was in Chicago, and I was like, this is cool. You miss it?
Chicago's not bad. We're actually there this week. We go back and forth for different things that we've got. It's a great city. I mean, Miami's great too. But like, you know, Chicago's got that Midwest fall seasons that you don't get here. But yeah, I think moving down here was one of the best decisions we made.
Love that for you guys. So, okay. So like a lot has changed, right? For both of us, probably. The last time we spoke, which on my podcast was episode 40, which is a long time ago, because now we're like getting close to 200 now, which yay. I was secretly going through it. You didn't know that at the time that I interviewed you. We were talking about making single your superpower, which was funny because I was still like super booed up at the time. You did not have a girlfriend at the time, and now you do. You have a girlfriend who you moved here with, which is amazing, mazel. Yeah, and I'm now single. I have made single my superpower since the last time we spoke. And it's been a really, really great ride. And I'm not going to lie, like your white background, red handwriting posts, like they give me life. They give me life. They're giving millions of people life. I'm loving this. I mean, like you're reaching so many people, and it's just so amazing. I love what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad they speak to you. Yeah, it's always interesting talking to people and like the different times in their life when my posts speak to them. I mean, they, equally speak to people who are going through it, who are recently single, who kind of came from a high and are at a low. They speak to people who are in a relationship and it's like very affirming for them. So it's always interesting of like mindfulness as a form of clarity, both at the highs and the lows, either affirming or reaffirming or reinventing. So I appreciate that. That makes me feel really good.
How do you even come up with this stuff? Like, where does it come from?
Well, I would say two things. First is like the mission. And then the second is like the inspo for the mission. And the mission is always the same. It's like, well, first of all, I mean, everything starts on the podcast. Like podcast is really the center of my universe. A lot of more people know me for my quotes than the pod, but the mission is always simple. It's like with anything I say or do or write or create, it's always, the mission is twofold. I want to help people feel seen. And then I want to give them a reason to have just a little bit more faith, a little bit more hope, a little bit more optimism. That's always the mission. So it's make someone feel less alone and then give them just like a little bit of spark to maybe believe in better days or, a new chapter. And then as far as like process goes, it's rather easy because the internet is full of people giving opinions on different things. Love is this, a red flag is this, so on and so forth. And it's easy for me. I'll read something that someone says, someone will say, love is XYZ. And I'll be like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I wonder what I would say to that. And then I just fill in the blank on my own. So it's a lot of like creative inspo from things that people have said or written. And then I say, okay, well, what if I were to put it in my universe, in my language, and in the way that I think? So it's a pretty simple process for me. I mean, I've got like, Google Docs of hundreds of pages of things that I've written or that inspire me. And then I'll just sit down and, I'll usually end up writing like 50 to 60 to 100 quotes. And then I'll publish 9 or 10 of them. Right. And they fit the bill and, short and sweet. And I really try to avoid like therapy language and like narcissist or attachment styles. I really try to stay away from that. And I always joke that it's golden retriever language, like so simple language, simple words, short words, less than 15 words. And I mean, I've been doing it for so long at this point, it's just kind of like second nature.
The last time we spoke, though, something that really stood out to me was staying tethered to your why, right? Like, and so I think about that, like in what I'm doing. And I recently started an online women's community. Like it's like a support for life, really. Cool. And I transformed my life in a 12-step program. And I'm like, oh my gosh, people need this, right? And I think that you are giving community to so many people through the things that you're publishing, right? Whether that's on your podcast or through your Instagram quotes. But what we spoke about specifically last time really has stuck with me, and that is staying tethered to your why. Yeah. And I think a lot of people like let that why get muddied, like that water gets murky sometimes, and you can drift far from it. And I think the people who find, and I don't know, this is an observation, it's like the people who are finding most authentic success or what feels really, really good to them, they are staying tethered to that mission. Yeah.
I'm curious what I said before. I don't even know what I would have said before, but I mean, the why is even stronger for me now, whatever version of it is, which I think is important. Like your why should evolve alongside of you. I mean, for me, it's just like, I talked to a lot of people. I spoke at a university here in Florida the other day, and people were like, oh, like, how do you become a writer? Or I want to be a podcaster. And I'm like, that's such a, good goal, but it's like, it's so removed from the essence of what you do. Like, don't become a podcaster, get a mission, then use a podcast to amplify. Don't become a writer because you want to, sell a lot of books, have a mission and then use your books to promote the mission. For me, the mission is what I just described, help people feel seen, give them faith. But more so, it's just like, I'm so turned off by pessimism. Like, I feel like a lot of my mission is just like an aversion to the current political, economic, social media, romantic climate nowadays, where just everything is gloom and doom. I was reading this article in The Atlantic the other day that was kind of given just a little gist of humanity over the past couple of centuries. And it was basically like, we went through this time and, I don't know, early 1900s where we're very community driven and we're wrapped around like growing the economy. And then, the Second World War united people for a common cause, and it was feel good and warm and neighborly. And then from there, we went into this very, very individualistic society. Me. And now we've come back around to the community side, but it's not the uplifting community. It's we rally around negativity and pessimism and doomsaying and all this stuff. And it just like, it drives me even further into my mission, which is to spread some hope, some optimism, and to do it mindfully, right? To use mindfulness as the way to inspire that. And I think that's just the more that I like spend time on social media and the more it's just like negative, negative, negative. And again, we're not being naive to the things that are negative that need to be addressed, but it's just like, I just want to be a small beacon of hope for people, myself included, to give us hope. And that mission, you could tell, I'm like, it amps me up. Like is the mission. And, it's always pulling at me to do it. By, 700 episodes in, written thousands of quotes, books, the whole thing.
So something that, so many people like Gabby Bernstein, Brene Brown, they talk about often is like giving your gift away. And so if your gift is giving hope to people, or like speaking or writing or whatever it is that you are doing, like it is first of all, like God, source, universe, like implanted those desires in your heart and mind specifically. And it is your duty for yourself, right? For your existence to give those gifts away. And so in my experience, like in the act of being of service to other people, it has actually tremendously served me, right? And it has given me, like being able to like help somebody in some capacity has been so transformative for me, and giving me like a sense of my own purpose and hope, right? And it's so like, it's this really beautiful cyclical thing. And I think you're right. And being a person like on social media, the way that each of us are, it's really hard to stay rooted and grounded in your mission and your why, and kind of like separating from that pessimism that is going on everywhere and returning to your own sense of your true north in a way, right? I think it's really, really difficult in the world that we live in, where everything is so social media driven, to stay the course. And so something we're going to talk about in a little bit is like something that you discussed on your most recent episode about like what people think they want from the outside. And we'll get there. But I want to hear your take on that. Like, how do you continue to stay positive with your mindfulness practice in the face of being an online presence? Because it's tricky.
For sure. Yeah. Even I actually just recorded an episode with Gabby Bernstein the other day, and we were talking about the idea of the self, and to accomplish what you're describing here, staying grounded, not being thrown off, you have to have that sense of self, like first and foremost. And we define self in different ways. And she's using this thing called internal family systems to define the self. It's her new book. But basically it's your intuition, it's your God-given presence and the old soul nature of who you are, right? So without that, everything you just described is so easy. Like, again, it's why I see people saying, I want to be a podcaster, or I want to be an influencer, because they're connected to the image of that thing. And then, oh my gosh, you're just going to be thrown to the wind when inevitably things are difficult or up and down. So you have to be grounded. For me, I used to care. I do not care. I don't want to be an influencer. I don't care how popular I am. I don't care about image. I care about writing. I care about the podcast. I care about my girlfriend. Like, that's all I care about. And I might be the exception here. I'm like very stubborn of like, once I made up my mind about something, nothing can throw me. That's just how I'm wired. But, I think it's like, I don't, on the public facing front, I don't want face recognition. I want name recognition. And that's, and I don't even care about name recognition. I want to promote the message. I like money. I like nice things. I want to do well, right? I'm savvy. I did well in my career. Like, I want to sell a lot of books. I want to make smart business decisions, but like, I don't need the flowers. I don't need the claps. I don't need to be invited to influencer events. I always turn them down anyway. Like, I don't need any of that. I don't want any of that, because it's so disconnected from the mission. And I don't want that to sound more noble than it is, but I literally just don't care. I think I used to, but I don't anymore. And I think, getting to that place comes from that sense of self, which is, evolving. And I'm 36 now. So in my 20s, this would have been a different conversation. I think it comes with a lot of introspection. And I think the great thing about the work that I do is that it's always, always, always benefiting me. You cannot help but grow as a man, a partner, a friend, a brother, a son, by doing what I do every single day. And that's why I always say, like, mindfulness is a muscle. Like, the more you do it, the better you get at it, the better you know yourself, the more you're less thrown by all the noise. So I don't know, not a bit of a specific answer, but like, I just don't care because what I care about overwhelmingly drowns out the noise or the temptation or anything like that. And I just, I have a lot of friends who are big name influencers. I have a lot of friends who are big name authors, and like, you talk to the ones that are grounded and you talk to the ones that aren't, and it is night and day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just never want to be thrown by something as silly as comparison or rushing or clout. to me, that's like the cringiest thing ever. I would rather be cringe in my own way, right? I'd rather be the guy who shares his feelings online and is too sensitive than being the person who, is
clout chasing.
Is clout chasing. Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Call me crazy.
But on like, to your point, right? You have these super famous memes that like travel. They like just travel. And I can see what you're saying in real time, because I'm like, I will see another account have screenshot your post, and it doesn't even say, like, you don't even mark it with your name. You don't even watermark your posts, right? Or your quotes that you're posting, and people will screenshot it, whether they tag you or not. A lot of people, I see that they do. I think that we are in a world where like people who give a shit about content creation and word thoughts and like thought leaders like are throwing back the mic to you on it. But it's almost like I can see it, because it's like you're putting the shit out there regardless. And it's like, however it gets to people, it gets to people. If people recognize what it looks like, great. If they don't, oh well, like whatever. And it's traveling, and people are doing what it's meant to do, which is spread your word. Essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to put it. It's doing what it's meant to do. Like, again, we talk about current case and old case. Like, I used to try to police it, and I would get all fired up, and I'd get all resentful and bitter. And like, first of all, that's a fool's errand. Like, you cannot police the internet. It's way too big. You're only going to burn yourself out. You're only going to end up just filled with that negative energy. Yeah. And more important, to your point, like, it's doing what it's supposed to do. So what? Someone else is stealing it, whatever. Like, I mean, I get DMs every single day of that. And did
you see so-and-so posted your quote and they didn't give you credit?
Yeah, and they're all fired up. And I'm like, and that's actually a really good point. Like, you could, I don't know, maybe this is an unfair comment, but like, you could tell sometimes a lot about the creator based on their followers. Like, when my followers come to me and they're like, "Case, this person's impersonating you, or this person's sharing your stuff without credit, like blah 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 blah." I'm like, "Hey, it's all good. Like, I appreciate that, but it's all good." And I remember this specifically many years ago, 2019, when I first started writing on Instagram. I didn't so much write my own quotes. I curated and would share other people's. And one time I made a mistake and didn't have the right attribution on it. It was my fault. It was a mistake. There's a reason why I only write my own quotes now. I don't want to just curate. But that person, the creator, came at me spewing hate. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me retract it." And I did. But the next day, this person had all of his followers come at me, and they would like tag me. They would tag like brands that I worked with. They would tag, I was on a very prominent news network. They would just like cases of fraud, but like all this stuff because of a mistake. Granted, it was a mistake, but it was such vitriol and hate and bitterness. And again, you can't control who follows you, but I was like, I never want my followers to be those people who go after people. Just, it's all good. It's the message. Appreciate the message. I don't need it. So anyway, it might be unfair to draw that corollary between followers and creator, but I never want that to be me. Never want that to be my followers. Just move on. Create something else. Create a new something,
Well, there's a couple things here, right? So like, I've been the target of online vitriol, right? And something that I've done, and like I've received a lot of like notes from my followers being like, "Don't listen to them, like ignore the haters." What I've done instead, Case, is I actually just hold a mirror up for it. I'm like, this is humanity. This is humanity. Like, a part of this is like, yes, I have an aversion to pessimism. I'm also like a mirror for everything, right? Like, I will reflect back, and not necessarily that I will make it my own and I will not receive it, but I will let it bounce off of me and reflect back to you and like highlight humanity. And I think that for me, that's been really healing for my own personal journey to address some of the things, right? And be like, you know what? I see this. It doesn't affect me, but look, let's take a look at humanity and like the roots of why we're behaving this way. And
for sure,
if I can turn my pain points, and this is something I actually posted today, I was like so excited. I'm interviewing Case Kenny today. It's like turning your pain points into, what was it? I'm going to look it up now. Oh no, because I just had it. Here we go. Turning your pain points you toward peace. That's what it is.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, like I have been through pain. Been through pain. Like, how can I take that and turn it into something that's going to help somebody else?
Yeah. I mean, that's the mission, of course. And I think the idea of a mirror is great. I think the idea of, the mission being founded in, helping people turn pain into peace, pain into power, whatever it may be. If that's the mission, then people who reach out to you from a place of pain, then you know exactly where they are in their journey and you wish them the best. And that's all you can and should do.
Absolutely. I got a little bit of like pushback from other like NBA wives, for example, when they were like really big mad about like my whole situation, whatever. And then they would turn around and like months later sometimes come back and be like, oh my gosh, I'm miserable and I don't know what to do. That's the reality of it. And I'm like, that's a separate conversation, babe. Like we can go there if you want, you know what I mean? And so it is a reflection of what people are going through. But on that note, I just want to like go through some of these things that really stood out to me from your platform. One of the things which it's something that totally would resonate with me. It's like they lost you and you got finer, happier, and even more magnetic. Like how many shares does that have and how does it relate to people? My gosh.
Yeah. I had a good feeling about that one because I mean, you just think about it. For the most part, again, there was always exceptions. There's always like tragic exceptions. Mm-hmm. But the reality of life is like, can you point to a time in your life where you failed or were rejected or had a breakup that in some way it didn't help you glow up in some way? Whether it was somewhat less tangible and maybe it gave you a new standard, a new boundary, and then that in turn helped you tremendously. But I mean, you think about the practicality of breakups, like talk to anyone. A breakup, suddenly you turn inward, your skin clears. That's a whole other conversation about the body knowing. Yeah. And I wrote that, I'm a man talking about skin clearing, but like that was, a little bit cheeky about the fact that the body knows. And two, just like, I just have so many examples. And in my own life, in my 20s, of just like, you get better looking, you get in better shape. Like you glow up from these things because you decide to, of course. It's not just a magical thing that happens, but yeah, I mean, I think there's such a redemption arc from pain, from frustration that, that was just a cheeky thing to remind people of that fact. And hopefully if they're amidst it, to see what good can come from it, even if they might not be able to connect the dots until the future. But yeah, I figured that one would resonate with people.
Well, I think part of it is that like people want to rush through it. And like the only way through is through. And it takes time to heal and recover from painful experiences in general. Right. And I think that like, because of the internet and we see so many people like putting their best curated lives on display, like you think that everything should be immediate and it's not. And it comes back to like the mindfulness being a muscle and it's something that you have to work at and you have to practice. And that doesn't happen overnight. Like you do not gain 15 pounds of muscle overnight. You just don't.
Yeah.
You don't lose X amount of weight, like it just doesn't happen. You don't get healthier overnight. It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time. And that's not just a physical thing. Like it presents physically in a lot of ways, like you're talking about, but like the healing process is not linear and it's not quick.
Yeah. That's why like a lot of times I liken healing to like patience and point of view. Like patience on the front of what you just said, important. But like point of view too. It's like healing. I wrote a quote, I think in that same series where I was just talking about like healing, and this is a classic trope, but like healing isn't about forgetting someone else. It's about remembering yourself. And I like that because it's all about point of view. It's like healing is no longer about that person. It cannot be. It is always about you and coming back to you and remembering you and enhancing you and evolving you. I think so often, particularly enhanced and powered by social media, we make the grieving process, we make the healing process about villainizing the other person.
Oh my gosh,
and whether or not they deserve to be villainized is another story, but immediately that is going to trip up your healing process because you're still making it about them. And I'm talking about people who are like, well, they're a narcissist. And like, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Yeah, I don't know. But like the fact that we're still labeling them instead of remembering ourselves is misguided. And it's human nature to want winners and losers. And I can't be a loser. So therefore they are. And here's all the reasons they are. And we're still making it about them. And we're still asking for permission for ourselves to move on subconsciously, not overtly. Right. And I think that patience would be, I'm okay to sit in this for a while without labels. And then point of view is, I'm not going to make it about them. I'm going to make it about myself. And I think between those two things, you can get to the point where you're like, man, I am hotter and wealthier and healthier and all these things. But we have to strip away the ego. We have to strip away the villainizing, and we have to strip away that point of view tendency.
So then that brings me to the next idea is like letting people have their own opinions of you.
Yeah.
Like, well, I mean, that has a lot to do with it, right? Like if you're trying to constantly like if you gave the example just now of like, I can't be the loser, so they have to be the loser. So I have to label that person, right?
Right.
Like being comfortable and okay with people labeling you as whatever the fuck they need to label you as and like keeping it moving.
Yeah. That's a superpower. Like there's a difference between people who have, I don't give a fuck about anybody or anything. That's not this. That is a little too apathetic and removed from humanity. This is a matter of, someone could very much have an opinion about me, and it might be a valid opinion, but it's always lacking in some regard because they're only judging me from their perspective and they do not know the full story. They're reacting from their own perspective and insecurity. So it's always lacking in some way. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with people making incomplete judgments and conclusions based on the 1 or 2 chapters that they saw of you, or 5 chapters, but they haven't seen all 6 chapters, whatever it may be. It's always incomplete in some way. I think your ability to sit in that space where someone can be shouting from a mountain untrue things about you, and yet you are unbothered to the best of your ability, that is a superpower. Difficult, self-control, self-restraint, ego kicked aside. But I mean, if you could sit in that space, I mean, you are as untouchable and at peace as I think anyone can possibly be.
All right, guys, let's take a quick break so I can thank our sponsor, Sana Skin Studio, with their OG location in Wynwood and their additional locations in Fort Lauderdale and Coconut Grove. Okay, so the best way I can describe Sana is that it feels like coming home. Unlike traditional facials, Sana's facials are rooted in education, and I love this so much. Every experience I have had at Sana has been a chance for me to learn more about my skin and its needs. I love that the facials are effective while also being accessible enough to be a monthly ritual rather than a yearly splurge. This is why the Sana membership is so great. I'm honored to be able to provide our audience with a promo code. Use the code THENOGLOW for $25 off of your first facial when booking at sanaskinstudio.com and additional incentives if you book a membership. I have absolutely loved my skin healing journey with Sana Skin Studio. Yeah, I think that keeps a lot of people stuck in relationships. And so we've talked before about like making single your superpower and like being a single person, moving into a relationship. People have gone through breakups. These are constant, like not constant, but consistent themes, right? In your content. And I think that keeps people stuck, the idea of what other people are going to think of them. And if I'm completely honest, like I've been there, like I have been there. I'm like, oh my gosh, what happens if I make this choice and everybody's going to know about it and what is going to happen, right? And that fear and has personally kept me stuck. And like the amount of people, once I opened up about that came and told me that that's their fear too, and that they can feel empowered to like move forward in the world because they see somebody else doing it or having done it or like moving through it, even if it's imperfect, gives people tremendous hope. However, it's still like that. It still means it's a very real thing that people stay stuck because they are terrified of so many things. But one of those things is about how they are going to be perceived afterwards, right? Instead of dropping into what that means for them. And so something that I want to talk about, another piece of advice or messaging that you give is like, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hard no. Right. And being able to like really understand that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a classic, right? Like, how can we better define the limits of like our regret, right? Mark Manson, of course, has the famous, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no, right? Like a little more so than I encourage people to do, to like deal in somewhat absolutes, to be like, this is my intuition. This is my heart. It's a yes. Therefore, it's a yes. It's a no. Yeah. It's a no. It's a not like, let so many cooks into the kitchen. I think that's always the problem. Like I always refer to it as like, again, talking about point of view and perspective, like, do you look at yourself through your own eyes or do you look at yourself through the eyes of other people? Majority of people, we look through the eyes of other people, right? How will this be perceived? What will people think? And that's a very difficult cycle to escape, especially if you're a public figure. So I think it's coming back to that level of intuition, how you talk to yourself, how you talk about yourself, and finding the space into that and say, okay, well then it's a yes or it's a no. I think especially in relationships too, like I'm coming out with a new book next year that, I made the cheeky remark that like, whether we realize it or not, like all of us are like somewhat in a threesome metaphorically, like it's us, our partner, and then everyone else's opinion. And we let that sway us so incredibly much, particularly in social media, right? Like a healthy relationship looks like this, or your partner should do this. And then we're like, well, mine doesn't. And I didn't realize I needed to want that. And then all of a sudden we're just in our heads where we're going crazy with all this comparison. So that's why it's like, I'm a huge proponent of social media. I'm a huge proponent of people sharing their stories and what's worked for them. But we have to be willing to say, that's a no for me, man. It's a no for me. I don't even need to dip my toe in that water. Like, my past experience has said that I don't need this, and that's finite. And I don't need more. Like, especially like living in Miami is so interesting because I feel like there's like no limit here on some people's appetites or aspirations. And I love a good, ambitious person. But at a certain point, when can you just be like, I've created peace in my life. I have stability. I've got a great partner. I don't need more pizzazz or, this or that. And, that's a personal decision to make, but it comes from that place of intuition of, is it a yes? Is it a no? And, I think like even in dating, like I'm trying to recall, I think I did an episode a long time ago about like how it's your job to move people into yes or no boxes. And you could be in the maybe box, but it's your job to be intentional about moving them into yes or into no. And that comes down to the questions you ask them, what you judge them based on, the level of compatibility you have with them. But it has to be intentional. I think so often we're just waiting for other people to say, hey, I'm a yes for you, or I'm a no. But normally we're waiting around for that. So, all in all, it comes back to, your intention to do that for yourself.
Well, I want to be clear about what you're saying, right? I want to make sure I understand it, because the putting them in a yes or no box is like asking the right questions, like you're saying, and then deciding for yourself if that's a yes or no for you. Not like letting them be the person to say, oh no, this is a yes. Like, you get a choice.
100%.
Like, you get to decide also. Like, and this is a very small example, but like the other day, my 6-year-old son came home from school and was like, Mommy, the 4th graders want to be my friend. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You're in 1st grade. That's cool. Right. And he was like, yeah, because they know who my is. And I was like, okay. I was like, all right, this seems like a good time to have a conversation. Yeah. I'm like, baby, you get to decide who you want to be friends with. I'm like, people don't just get to choose you. They don't just get to look at you and say, you're my friend. And I'm like, and mind you, he's 6 years old. He's 6. So I have to like break this down for him in a way that like his 6-year-old brain can comprehend without like doing the whole thing of like, be careful what people's intentions are for you, because that's not developmentally appropriate for him at this stage. But I remember saying, okay, you know what? When you look at that person who claims to be a friend, you are allowed to also get a decision on whether or not you want to be their friend. Are they nice to your friends who are in 1st grade? Are they nice to other adults? Do they treat other people the way that you would want it to be treated, right?
I could not agree more with you about being an active participant in your life. And I'm talking practically about the questions you ask. How are you gauging someone's character and intentions? Like, if you're the type of person who just waits for them to show them to you, you're automatically in the passenger seat. I'm talking about practically the questions you ask, the way that you observe them. Assume positive intent. Be the person who believes in goodness, but be a freaking lawyer. Look at the details. That's one. And then 2, about this whole question of yes or no. It's a very difficult question to ask, because sometimes it requires patience. And if we're too quick to react, we can throw away a good thing. The question that I come back to that I think is really helpful, particularly, we're talking about 20s and 30s, like when you've got life experience, when you've turned pain into power, pain into peace. The question to ask yourself in the present is, with this person, am I honoring my past self? That is, am I finding myself in the same position that I put myself in again in the past and I got burned because I ignored it? Am I putting myself in a position now where I'm respecting the boundaries and the standards that I created after that horrible breakup when I was 24, right? That is the question. I think we find a lot of clarity there, because we all make promises to ourselves, particularly after pain. We're like, I'm never going to accept this again. My new standard is this. And then life and time, and then we kind of forget. Come back to the question, am I honoring that? Am I honoring that standard I promised myself I would never let go again? Ask yourself that, and then be a lean forward type person. Don't wait for someone to show you their intentions. Ask what they are. Receive the answer. Could be truthful, could be not. But then look at the actions and just, be that person who cares. Don't be that person who is just floating and waiting for someone to show you or tell you.
Yeah, I've practiced this so many times, like since divorce. I'm like, okay, I observe and I'm like, oh, I learned that lesson already. And I'm like, God, thank you for sending me this lesson packaged differently, right? I'm like, oh, you packaged it differently and you presented it to me
new flavor
to see if I needed to, if I've learned it, if I've grown, if I'm observing like the lessons that you've given me, God, right? And I'm like, oh, it's here again. And I have the opportunity to not have to repeat it, because how many times did I repeat the lesson? How many times are you going to torture yourself through the lesson? And I'm like, God will eventually donkey kick your ass through the door, right? Like you will get donkey kicked through the door of learning the lesson that you need to learn until you're able to see it and recognize it in different packaging, in different sizes, in different appearance, whatever, in like different times of your life. And it'll come back in different forms, right? And maybe you've healed. And so that lesson comes back in a different version of itself to see like, okay, now what? Now what? You've done this growth. You've done this introspection. You've done this. You've stayed in your power. Let me test you again.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're also, Case, like, how about we reserve the right to be wrong? Number one, I reserve the right to be wrong. And I also reserve the right to change my mind, right? At any given point in time, I reserve the right to change my mind about how I want to do things. So when people get down on themselves about like, oh my gosh, I fell for it again. Like I fell for this lesson that God presented me with again. Like that's okay. You're now allowed to change your mind that you don't want to do that lesson anymore. Like we're going to go a different route. When we see the lesson, we're going to be like, I see you. I recognize you. I remember how that feels in my body. That's a no.
Yeah. It's okay to make mistakes. Turn it into a catalyst. Turn it into a catalyst. Be like, okay, I did it again. I did it freaking again. Last time. And then you truly act on that. Like, that's okay. Like the reality of life is, of course we're going to make those mistakes. It's what you do with it. It's how motivated you are from that. And then it's also like, I did a post the other week of like a series of, it's actually attractive to, and it got like 400,000 likes on it. And basically a reframing of some of these things that we think will turn off people. Right. Namely, asking for clarity in a relationship, being the person who's like, hey, I like you. I think you like me. Are we doing this or what? We think that is unattractive. And the reality is, yeah, sure, it will be unattractive to the wrong person. To the right person, it is a godsend. It is like, oh my gosh, thank God we don't have to play these games anymore. Fantastic. And that's right. You know, people can disagree with me, and some people are like, no, people like games, and men like mysterious women, and we may wait for the man to make the move and all this kind of stuff. And there's truth in there, and there's gender roles and this and that, and that's fine. But I think at the end of the day, like everything we're talking about here practically gets brought to life by reframing of what we think is attractive or unattractive. And, the idea of being passive or active. For me, it just never sits well with me to be like, well, I hope this person wants the same thing I do. What do you mean you hope? Well, you're just going to wait and hope one day that they say they do. To me, that's a ridiculous mindset, and carries over into business. It carries over into the creative industry and the arts and music. Yeah, I don't think it's ever acceptable just to sit there and hope. We are fully capable of creating clarity, receiving clarity. It's all about what we ask and what we look for, and not allowing ourselves to sit in that gray area for too long.
Well, I mean, I think that whatever you're not changing, you're choosing. There's that. Like, if you're not changing it, then the part of you is choosing it. Yeah. Right. And I think that there's a lot to be said about the clarity part of it, where I think especially women are afraid to ask, or afraid to be like proactive about intentions or boundaries, right? And I think that men also will do this, where they people kind of try to trick themselves into believing that they're comfortable with something that they're not, right? Yeah. You see a lot of women that are like, oh my gosh, maybe if I sleep with him long enough, and if I'm that girl, he'll make me his girlfriend eventually.
It's wild.
Why are we not having those conversations in advance? And then I think conversely, a lot of men, and these are stories that I've heard of from tons of single friends, and also just experience in the world of dating again, right? Is men will also be like, oh yeah, maybe I want a girlfriend, or maybe I have, no, my boundaries are cleared up on, from my past or whatever. And it's, people aren't clear because they're scared of losing the option, right? They don't want to be, are scared, so scared of being transparent, because they are scared of losing the possibility. Yeah. Yeah. I think that if people, men and women both, were a lot more clear upfront about their intentions or their desires, or what they're looking for, right? It would get a lot of this stuff out of the way. And it's not that hard. You think about people who are really averse to having to face those types of conversations because they're hard and they're sticky and sometimes they're uncomfortable. But if you're able to actually sustain the discomfort right? Or the unfamiliarity of it, if you're not used to it, you can actually get to wherever it is that you want to go, whether that's a situationship or a casual fling or a real relationship or marriage or whatever it is. You can get there faster if you actually face it, and it might be uncomfortable, especially if you're not used to doing that.
Imagine that. Crazy thought. I mean, there's so much good stuff there. I would add 3 things quickly. The first is what you just described of, maybe I'll sleep with him, then I'll meet my boyfriend, whatever. Scarcity mindset. It's crazy. And it's okay, but it's crazy. Second, if you want a relationship with someone, you saying, I am dating for a relationship, I want commitment. And you have to convince them that they too want a relationship, not necessarily with you, but just in general, right? We're talking to a guy who's like, I don't really know if I'm ready to settle down.
Yeah.
You have no business engaging with that person anymore because now you have 2 things to convince them. The first one would be that you have compatibility, that he likes you. And that you always have to do that, right? You have to present your best self. You have to find compatibility. That's always the pressure of dating someone, presenting your best self, creating that compatibility. But now on top of that, you have the insurmountable pressure and responsibility to convince them that broad strokes that they even want a relationship, that they're a relationship person. And that is not ever something that you should have on your shoulder on top of creating that compatibility. So I think that's such a slippery slope that people find themselves into of giving themselves 2 tasks. 1, creating that connection, but 2, convincing them that person even wants a connection with anyone in general. So I think it's totally unfair. And then the third thing I would say is, I don't know if I said this in our podcast a couple of years ago, because this is a soundbite that I always repeat, but like when it comes to what you were saying about speaking up, asking for intentions, asking for clarity, it's a very difficult thing. If you have a more abundant mindset, it will be much easier. But for me, it's always a matter of like, how can I fire myself up? Like not in like a soft and sensitive way, but like get up and do this thing. It's a matter, like I always repeat the mantra to myself. Anytime I don't want to have a conversation because I'm feeling small or I'm feeling scarcity driven, it's anytime you speak up, you always win because you either get what you want or you get what you need. So that's always my rallying cry. Case, get what you want, get what you need. Get what you want, get what you need. And what I mean, of course, is you either get what you want. You say, hey, are we doing this or not? I'm a little confused. And they're like, yes, we absolutely are. I'm sorry. Maybe I've been miscommunicating. Yes, we're on the same page. You get what you want. Or you get what you need. And they're like, no, I'm not down. You put my back up against the wall. I'm just, I can't do it. Well, you got what you needed because now you're free and you're not sitting in that limbo. You're not doing that thing. So, it's not easy to do, of course, because we're all wired to be averse to rejection. And, I'm getting older or I don't want to start over. But I've always just found a rallying cry of get what you want, get what you need, get what you want, get what you need. Even in like sales, when I used to do sales, everyone was like, I was a regional vice president. All my account executives were like, I can't ask if they want to buy from us because what if they say no? I'm like, well, good. Then we can move on and stop wasting our time with this client. So, I mean, this transcends relationships, but lean forward, ask for clarity, ask for intentions, and then look for the actions to align. And I think you're going to save yourself a lot of time.
Case, I want to close with talking about your most recent episode that I listened to. I believe it is for those who are interested, it's episode 654, What People Think is the Bag. Literally in your most recent episode, when shallow people are easily impressed by shallow things like worshiping money and fame and beauty and power, because that's where this is what you said, right? That's where these people think they will find validation in their own lives, and that's their North Star. So they look for that on paper anyway. And the idea of having the perceived perfect lives and seeing the world through the lens of status rather than substance.
Yes. So I did that episode, and
that sounds like a trap. It sounds like a big trap.
Yeah. So I talked about the question of asking people, who do you respect and why, as like a good barometer into who someone is. Because for the most part, people won't really have a prepared answer to that question unless they're like interviewing recently and maybe they have an answer ready. So it's like a good barometer into maybe some realness real quick. And again, I don't judge people who say, oh, I like Taylor Swift because she makes great music and that's it. That's fine. I also don't judge people who are like, well, that person's got a lot of money. That's fine. That's great. I'm really more interested in the why. Yeah. And of course, this is not world breaking stuff here, but you talk to people, and they're impressed just by the money or just by the sex appeal. And it's like, I'm not sure that I would be compatible with that person, because I would be compatible with them if they said, man, like Elon Musk is a baller because of he's crazy work discipline, crazy smart, crazy intelligent, crazy dedicated. He put all his money in and risked everything for this thing that he believed in. Okay, cool. So you respect resilience, you respect discipline. Right. Instead of, oh, wow, look at her body. That's crazy. Like, I want that. Think of how sexy I would be. No, you admire the dieting, the dedication, the resilience, like this kind of thing. I know this is a little cliche, but you can get some really good insight into two things when people tell you who they admire and why. You get insight into who they want to be, which is important, right? The person they actually aspire to be. And you could also get insight into maybe perhaps what they're insecure about, through which they think that they can finally feel validated in their lives. And I say a lot of this in reaction to living in Miami, where you see a lot of those like street interviews here on TikTok, which are so cheesy and probably fake. But you see all these like guys walk up to other guys through the lens of male, and they're like, so like what are your goals? And it's just, it makes me so sad. These men being like, oh, I just want to drive a Lambo and have the Richard Mille, and I just want to live on Star Island. And like guy after guy after guy are saying variations of that. I'm just like, that's so sad. Like, and again, I'm not trying to be like some old wise guru here saying money doesn't matter. Of course money matters. Yeah. But like, to make that your aspiration in life, and to not be able to verbalize the why, the how, it makes me so sad, because those guys are going to grind their face off to try to get that. They're going to succeed. They're going to fail. And then they're going to look back and be like, well, that didn't do anything for me internally. That didn't help my relationships. I just think it's such an L. We need balance. Like, I have a lot of successful friends. I consider myself to be pretty successful. I like nice things. The balance between those two is where the sweet sauce is at. Like, I don't encourage people to be like, money doesn't matter. That's a naive mentality. But like, figure out who they respect and why. It's back to your question. I think it's just a good question to ask. If not a conversation starter, you can get some insight into people.
One of the things that's become kind of like my personal motto as I've moved through like being single again is that like I'm easy to please, but hard to impress, because like I am super easy to please. It's easy. Like, what impresses me is not necessarily what might impress like the everyday person or what other people aspire to have. And that's coming from somebody that like I've lived a lot of the ideas that people think they want. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I've experienced that. And I know how that felt for me. And what really impresses me now is like the substance and the character and the integrity and the wisdom and the kindness and the discipline, creativity. Right. And I think that if we get centered as people, right, to question, okay, why do I like that? Why am I attracted to that? Because like you said, I like nice things too. I love nice things. I love dressing up. I love style. I love fashion. I love aesthetics. I love aesthetics. I went to art school, right? And I used to feel really ashamed about that. And now I'm like, oh, no, that's part of who I am. But why do I like it? I know at my core who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? And I think if people get really in touch with that, I think that they're going to be better off, and having the courage to ask those questions, right? And not being scared. Yeah. Because ultimately, like you're saying, you get what you want and you get what you need.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, it wraps it up nicely too, because I mean, we're still talking about why, which is everything that we're talking about here. It's about why through yourself. It's about why through others. And I think, that's something that we get in touch with increasingly as we get older. And I think the key is like, how can you accelerate that process? How could you be drawn to your why, and not just drawn to it, but be aware of it? And that's why I think mindfulness as like an umbrella is what gets you through there, whether that's through journaling, which I'm a big proponent of, or whether that's through just classic sitting with thoughts and then putting human language behind it. Like, I won't turn this into a whole diatribe here, but like, we think a lot about mindfulness and we think, oh, mindfulness is sitting with your feelings. It's being present, mind and body, right? It's very Zen and Buddha. And I think, yes, that's step one, right? Mindfulness, whether you're doing it through a cold plunge, yoga, therapy, meditation, a silent retreat, whatever it is. Yes. Step one is you sit with how you feel and you're non-judgmental of it and you accept it. But that can't be all we do. You can't just ruminate. The step two, and what I have taken it upon myself with writing, is then, okay, you listen to yourself and then you talk to yourself. You stand up and you speak back to yourself. You vocalize the standard. You vocalize the why. You put human language behind the intuition that you're able to unearth through mindfulness, step one. And that's the biggest thing that I really help things separate just sitting in your thoughts and being burdened by them, as opposed to then standing up and celebrating them and turning them into things that you could vocalize, that you get a tattoo of, that you could say 12 words to describe a worldview. That, I think, makes it much more human. and not withdrawing from the world, but putting yourself into it full force, but saying, no, this is what I believe. This is what I want. Here's how I find it. And I keep going until I do. I think that is the more powerful version of mindfulness.
Case, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation about the human experience, really. I think that's what this is like we're talking about the human experience, right? And thank you for giving so many people, so much hope, and for coming onto my show and sharing your wisdom with my audience. And I can't wait to talk to you again because I feel like there's going to be more of this.
Cool. Of course. Thanks for having me. Great chat.
Love to have you.
This podcast was brought to you by Sana Skin Studio. Be sure to use my code, TheNoGlow, for $25 off of your first facial at Sana when booking via sanaskinstudio.com. More than a skin studio, Sana is a movement towards healthier skin and self-love. Thank you so much for listening to The Know. If you loved this episode, go ahead and share it with a friend. Words are so powerful, and someone may need to hear what we covered today. And if you really loved this episode, please take a moment to rate the show and leave a review. Your comments are so important and valued, and they give other listeners insight on what to expect on The Know. You can connect with me personally via Instagram at Nikki Spo and The Know with Nikki Spo. My hope for you today is that you are fearless in looking inward so that you can be your highest, most authentic self and go after the life of your dreams.